Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at a neat little technique to improve your landings. Now this is a technique taught to me by my flight instructor as well as the good old AOPA. They have this great little video that actually shows you what this looks like in action. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to do a very aggressive power wheelie with the airplane, and we're going to memorize what that power wheelie looks like so that when we come to land the airplane we have a better idea of what our flare should look like when we want to put the plane safely down on the ground. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're basically going to pretend we're landing the plane without ever leaving the ground. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it actually is a really good technique, and when you start to build up the muscle memory for it, it becomes a little easier. For those of you curious, we're here at Stewart International. This is a very, 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 very long runway. I like long runways for this example because it's going to get you kind of prepared and get you to be better able to have time to play with this experiment. So one thing I will do, though, before I get set up here, is I'm actually going to make sure my winds are nice and neutral. You could do this with a headwind if you want. It really doesn't make any difference. The only difference a headwind's going to do is it's going to make you give a little bit less runway, or actually more runway at your disposal. Not runway, but you'll have more time is really what I'm saying. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend we're in a landing configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the controls here. We could go all the way down to flaps full here, which would be 30 degrees. We could always pop it at flaps 22 if you want a little more control. Generally use whatever flaps is appropriate for the wind speed you're dealing. So in this case, no wind, so I'm going to go boop, pop the flaps all the way down, and down they go. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give our aircraft about, let's call it 50% throttle-ish. Then we're going to pull up the nose, and we're going to balance on the back tires at exactly the speed we would normally be hitting the ground at. And we're simply going to hold that wheelie without leaving the ground and without basically letting the front wheels sit down. Like I said, think of it like a power wheelie. So what you're going to see is when we're looking out the nose of the plane now is at that exact sweet speed that we're doing our little power wheelie is going to be the angle the plane needs to be to safely and smoothly apply onto the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and kill my brakes. I'm going to go ahead and give ourselves full power here. Give us just a little bit. Again, we need to get rolling. We're going to look at probably 40 or 50 knots is how fast we're going to get going here. Just going to hold that up there like this. I'm not going to touch my controls until I get a little bit of airspeed on the gauge there. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and slowly start to lift the wheel up. And I'm just going to play with the throttle. And I'm going to try not to leave the ground. So that's going to get me about 40 knots, which is my stall speed. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually holding the plane just a millimeter over the ground. So I'm actually going to back the throttle out just a little bit. We want to settle back onto the ground here. And back on the ground. And there we are. Oop, a little bit too much power still. Back out the power a couple knots. This is really fun in a low-wing airplane also. There we go. So now what we're doing is we're just going to sit here at this angle. Now this is going to seem like the most awkward thing you've ever done on a plane, but believe it or not, this angle this plane is currently sitting at is the correct angle you want to be settling down on the ground with. So if you look out the nose of this plane, this is the sweet angle that you normally would be hitting the ground at. Keep in mind we're completely trapped by ground effect right now, which has a big impact on the overall performance of our little operation we're doing here. But if you can memorize kind of what this kind of looks like, you're going to be on your way to a much, much, much softer landing. Now one of the things I think is really cool with this is if you actually were to go ahead and kill the flaps, as the nose starts to get heavy, you can actually feel it drop back down. So you could go ahead and increase the power. Go ahead and pull the entire operation go, trying not to leave the ground. And you could hold this again, where you're doing this little tiny wheelie here, and now you can see what it looks like out the nose of the plane if you were doing a landing with no flaps. And again, this is a super cool technique, and in the real world, it's kind of hard to execute this smoothly because there's always some kind of gusting winds making things interesting for you. And if you want, you can even give it just a tiny bit of power, float out a ground effect, pull the power back, hold your nose at that new landing attitude, and now you've actually executed a fairly effective landing and keeping that front wheel off the ground. So again, just a quick little technique to kind of make your landings a little bit better. This works with really any airplane. I don't know that I'd try it in an airliner, but I'm sure you could try it. Enjoy.